They thought the accident took his sight. They whispered secrets in front of him, held hands under the table, and plotted to steal his company, all because they thought he was trapped in darkness. But they were wrong. He wasn't blind. He was just watching. And what he saw changed everything. Michael Hartley had always believed that character revealed itself most clearly under pressure. In boardrooms, pressure made men overtalk. In negotiations, it made them greedy. In marriage, he had once thought, pressure made people loyal. The accident taught him otherwise. It happened on a rain-polished Thursday in November, just after 6 in the evening. Michael had left the office later than usual, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping absently against the console while city traffic crawled toward the interstate. The windshield wipers beat a hard rhythm across the glass. His phone buzzed twice in the cup holder, one message from his wife, Lena, asking if he still wanted salmon for dinner, and one from his business partner, Stephen Marsh, marked urgent. He never read either. A delivery truck lost control, 2 lanes over. Tires screamed, metal jackknifed. The sedan in front of Michael spun sideways, and by the time instinct caught up with physics, there was nowhere left to go. The impact was violent, bright, and brief. When Michael woke, the world was white and antiseptic and humming softly above him. His left temple throbbed. His ribs felt as though someone had tightened steel bands around them. One eye was bandaged, the other saw only a blurred haze of movement and light. Lena was at his bedside, gripping his hand so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. "Michael," she whispered, leaning over him. "Can you hear me?" He could. He could also hear the doctor just outside the curtain, speaking in the careful, lowered cadence doctors used when they had bad news and practiced delivering it. Significant trauma around the orbital ridge, swelling, temporary vision loss possible, difficult to know the long-term outcome until the inflammation subsides. Temporary, possible, difficult to know. Michael lay there without moving and understood something instantly that the people around him had not yet grasped. Uncertainty could be more useful than truth. By the second day, the bruising around his eyes had turned a deep, ugly violet. Bright light stabbed at his skull. His vision came and went in smeared flashes. Enough to know where the edges of things were, enough to tell one face from another if he concentrated, but not enough for anyone to question the story forming around him. The nurses darkened the room. Lena helped him reach for water. Stephen visited once with flowers too expensive to be sincere. Janice Patel, his executive assistant, sent a handwritten note that said only, "Take the time you need. We'll hold the line." Michael read all of it through slitted eyes, and by the time he was discharged, walking slowly with dark glasses and a cane recommended more for appearance than need, he had made his decision. He would let them believe he was blind. Not forever. Only long enough. Long enough to see what people did when they thought he no longer could. The house became a theater almost immediately. Lena moved through it with the concentrated kindness of a woman determined to be necessary. She arranged the pantry in tactile rows. She labeled containers. She shifted furniture by inches so he could navigate more easily. She spoke more gently than before, touched his elbow more often, and seemed to hover at the edges of every room waiting to anticipate his next need. Michael thanked her, counted steps, memorized sounds, kept his eyes unfocused behind the dark lenses. At night, when she slept beside him, breathing soft, and even in the dark, he lay awake and listened to the silence between them. It was not yet suspicion, not exactly. It was the sensation of something in his life having slipped half an inch off its track. At Hartley and Company, the same sensation sharpened. The company occupied 2 polished floors in a downtown glass building, all clean lines and muted confidence. Before the accident, Michael had been its center of gravity. He founded it 7 years earlier on equal parts technical brilliance and disciplined risk, building a boutique software firm into a respected mid-sized player specializing in neural interface systems, secure automation, and predictive behavioral tools. Pulse, his flagship platform, was the crown jewel, a system so advanced that 3 larger firms had tried and failed to buy it outright. Now he returned to the office moving slowly, cane in hand, led by Janice to the leather chair in his corner office. Everyone spoke to him differently, too clearly, too slowly, too gently. And once he stopped being offended by it, he began to understand its value. People relaxed around helplessness. Stephen took over meetings with smooth, unearned confidence. He was a wiry man in his early 40s, perpetually composed, with the kind of face that could look concerned and self-protective at the same time. Before the accident, Michael had valued Stephen for his operational discipline. Now, from behind dark glasses and apparent impairment, he noticed subtler things: the way Stephen closed doors before certain calls, the way he deferred in public and overreached in private, the way his hand lingered on files that didn't belong on his desk. Janice became nervous. That, too, was new. She had always been competent in the unshowy way Michael trusted most, but now her pen tapped too often. Her emails arrived too late at night. She avoided silence as though afraid of what might enter it. The office emptied by 7:30. City light pressed dimly against the glass. Janice stood in the doorway of his office holding a folder she had no reason to bring. "You wanted to see me?" Michael sat facing the window, glasses on, cane within reach. "Close the door." She did. For a moment, he let the silence hold. Then he said, "Why did Stephen ask you to place the drive in the conference room?" The folder nearly slipped from her hands. What?" "You heard me." Her breath caught. "Michael, I know it was you, Janice." He turned his face toward her voice, careful to keep the performance intact. "What I haven't decided yet is whether you are frightened, compromised, or stupid. Help me narrow it down." The words hit their mark. Janice sank into the chair opposite his desk as though her knees had given way. "It was supposed to be a backup," she said too quickly. "That's what he told me. He said Meridian wanted a mirrored copy of the presentation environment in case the upload failed. I knew it sounded wrong. I knew it. But he kept saying you weren't well enough to handle details and that if I caused a problem now, the whole company could fall apart." Michael said nothing. Tears gathered in Janice's eyes. "I didn't know how far it had gone. I swear I didn't. He's changed, Michael. Ever since the accident, he's acted like—" She searched for the word. "Like the room belongs to him." That rang true. "Do you still have access to his calendar?" "Yes." "Good." He leaned back slightly. "Then you're going to continue acting exactly as you have been. You are not going to warn him. You are not going to panic. And when I ask for something, you're going to give it to me before you give your fear time to form an opinion." Janice stared at him. "You believe me?" "No," Michael said. "I'm using you." Oddly, that steadied her more than reassurance would have. She nodded. "Good," he said. "Now go home." At home, the situation was quieter and uglier. The affair with Andy emerged first, not in cinematic declarations, but in the intimate corrosion of repeated secrecy. Burner phone messages hidden in a desk drawer. Late-night calls cut short when footsteps approached. The kind of language people used when they wanted to feel understood, more than they wanted to be good. "He doesn't even see me anymore." "Then come where you're seen." Michael found the messages in a phone Lena had hidden in the blue sitting room behind a stack of stationery. He sat in her chair while the house slept, reading thread after thread in the cold glow of the screen. There were no grand promises, no plans to run away. That almost made it worse. This was not epic passion. It was emotional drift, vanity, complaint, the small, selfish warmth of being attended to by the wrong person. Andy listened. Lena answered. A line was crossed, then crossed again, then maintained by habit and shame. What stopped Michael cold was not the affair itself. It was Meridian. Scattered among the messages between Lena and her sister Catherine were urgent warnings. "He keeps asking about Michael's prototypes. You need to stop seeing him. I think he's connected to something bigger." So Andy was not simply a lover. He was an access point. And Catherine knew enough to be afraid. Michael called her on a Sunday morning from the study while Lena was in the garden with the dogs. "Michael?" Catherine sounded startled. "Yes." A pause. "Is Lena all right?" "That depends," he said, "on whether you're finally ready to tell me the truth." There was no point pretending confusion. By the time the call ended, he knew about Vanguard, a consortium of private interests circling Meridian's acquisition strategy, eager to absorb smaller innovators by any means polite enough to survive daylight. He knew Andy was their liaison. He knew Catherine had seen enough to fear that Pulse was being targeted and had begged Lena to end things before personal stupidity became corporate catastrophe. "Why didn't you come to me?" Michael asked. Catherine's answer was immediate and miserable. "Because by then, she had already lied to you, and every warning I gave after that sounded like panic, not principle." It was a terrible answer. It was also honest. Michael hung up and stood for a long time in the quiet study, one hand on the desk, looking out through the half-open blinds at a world that felt suddenly overpopulated by weak people making expensive choices. Then he called Jose Alvarez. Jose had been a friend once, back when friendship still happened in cheap apartments over takeout and code. Later, he became the sort of cybersecurity specialist whose name never appeared in press releases, but whose invoices suggested governments had found him useful. If Michael trusted anyone to help him build a trap, it was Jose. Jose arrived 2 nights later wearing a dark hoodie and the unimpressed expression of a man who found most human disasters technically solvable and emotionally tedious. "You look terrible," Jose said by way of greeting. "I've had a difficult month." "So has your network." They worked until 3 in the morning in Michael's study, screens glowing across stacks of books and untouched tea. Jose traced traffic through the office system, the home assistant, the conference room power grid, and a shell vendor tied to Meridian's executive installations. By 1:15, they knew the USB in the conference room had been a decoy. By 2:10, they knew the real leak route had been Michael's home system. By 2:40, they knew Catherine's credentials had been used to authorize the original smart home install after the accident. "Before you look at me like that," Jose said, hands moving over the keyboard, "I'm not saying she sold you out. I'm saying compromised people love legitimate credentials. She may have opened the door without knowing who planned to walk through it." Michael stared at the logs. Every room in his house, every dictated memo, every voice note he had spoken into Ada because pretending blindness made keyboards inconvenient in front of witnesses. He should have felt anger first. Instead, he felt admiration, cold and unwilling. It was a clever breach, domestic, plausibly deniable. Exactly the kind of thing men like Andy would exploit because they understood that people locked company servers and neglected kitchen speakers. "Can you close it?" Michael asked. Jose's mouth twitched. "I can do better. I can let them think it's still open." Michael turned toward him. Now they were speaking the same language. The plan came together quickly after that. Janice fed Michael calendar updates and access logs from inside the office. Jose built false trails, mirrored feeds, and legal evidence packages that could survive forensic scrutiny. Catherine turned over messages, service authorizations, and enough of her own shame to make herself useful at last. Michael did not tell Lena any of it. Not yet. He wanted the business betrayal contained first. Emotional betrayal could wait one more night. Theft of intellectual property could not. He sent Stephen a message through the company system just before noon on Thursday. "We need to talk about Meridian. There's been a breach. Meet me tonight at 8 p.m. at the warehouse on 12th and Maple. Bring the contract. Come alone." Then he sent Elaine Porter, his outside counsel, retained quietly 2 weeks earlier under the pretense of estate planning, the evidence package marked for immediate action. At 7:58 that night, Michael entered the unfinished warehouse on 12th and Maple carrying a manila folder, his laptop, and a cane he no longer needed but still understood the dramatic value of. Rain tapped the half-finished roof. Work lights hung dark above steel beams. The city muttered beyond the open frame of the building. Stephen was already there. He stood near a support column, coat immaculate, expression unreadable. "Michael," he said, "you shouldn't be out alone." "You've started repeating yourself," Michael replied. Stephen's gaze flicked over the folder. "You said there was a breach." "There is." He set the laptop on a rusted workbench and opened it halfway. "You sold Pulse?" Stephen exhaled once through his nose. You always did prefer bluntness to proof. Michael tapped a key. The warehouse lights blazed on. At the same instant, the laptop screen split into 4 feeds. The Meridian contract meeting, Janice placing the USB, Stephen entering a private garage with Meridian's legal officer, and Andy Collins leaving Michael's side door at 11:17 p.m. on 3 separate dates. Stephen's face changed. Not much, but enough. You were watching. For longer than you think. 2 men stepped into the warehouse opening behind Stephen. Meridian security, or something close to it, controlled posture, dark coats, no wasted movement. Michael heard them before he saw them. You didn't come alone, he said. Stephen's mouth tightened. Neither did you. Michael smiled slightly. No. He pressed another key. Sirens rose outside. The sound hit the warehouse like a physical force. Red and blue light strobed against the steel beams. One of the men behind Stephen swore and backed toward the opening. The other reached instinctively for an earpiece. Then Michael's phone rang on the workbench. He put it on speaker. "Mr. Hartley," said Elaine Porter's cool voice. "This is to confirm that federal investigators, regulatory counsel, and the board's emergency committee have received the evidence package in full. Warrants are being executed at Meridian Technologies and associated shell entities. Do you authorize immediate referral for Stephen Marsh and any affiliated participants on site?" Stephen stared at Michael as if seeing him for the first time. "Yes," Michael said. "Proceed." By the time the officers entered, Stephen had stopped pretending this was negotiable. As they moved to cuff him, he said only one thing. Lena knew. Michael stood perfectly still. The officers turned to Stephen, read him his rights, and led him away into the rain. The words stayed behind. The silence after the police left was the loudest thing Michael had ever heard. The house was waiting when he returned. Carla, the housekeeper, met him in the kitchen with both hands twisted in a dish towel. "Mrs. Hartley isn't here," she said. "She left with her sister about half an hour ago." "Did she say where?" "No, sir. Only that she needed air." Michael looked at her face and understood there was more. "What is it, Carla?" She swallowed. "I should have told you before, about the man coming to the house." "Andy." "Yes?" "Did Lena know he was tied to Meridian?" "I don't think so," Carla whispered. "She seemed ashamed, Mr. Hartley. Not strategic." He nodded once. That mattered. Not enough. But it mattered. Then his phone rang. Catherine. "She's at St. Anne's on West 58th, Catherine said. "Please come." The church was nearly empty when he arrived, all candlelight and stone and old restraint. Lena stood near the front pews, face pale, eyes raw from crying. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she said, "I was coming home." It was such a uselessly hopeful sentence that Michael almost laughed. "Did you know about Meridian?" he asked. "No." "Did you know Andy was feeding information to people around my company?" "No." "Did you let him into my house?" Her shoulders folded. "Yes." "Did you betray me?" The word hung between them, plain and graceless. Lena closed her eyes. "Yes." Michael took off his dark glasses. Her gaze snapped to his face. He let her see what little he chose to reveal. The steady focus, the absence of helpless wandering, the unmistakable fact that he had not been blind in the way she believed. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough." Shock moved across her face in stages, confusion, hurt, then horror as she understood what that meant. That he had endured months of injury and deception while silently carrying knowledge of her affair, her lies, the man she had brought near his home. "I didn't tell you," Michael said quietly, "because I didn't know who in my life was safe to tell." That struck her harder than anger would have. She sat down abruptly in the pew behind her and covered her mouth with both hands. "I made you a stranger in your own life," she said. He looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he answered. There was no dramatic collapse after that, no screaming, no sudden absolution, only truth, arriving too late to prevent damage, but not too late to matter. Lena admitted the affair in full. Not romance, not conspiracy. Loneliness, vanity, complaint, and the intoxication of being seen by the wrong man at the wrong time. Catherine had warned her. She had tried to end it. Not cleanly, not fast enough, not before the overlap between emotional weakness and corporate threat turned lethal. Michael listened. He did not spare her, but he did listen. That was, in its way, the cruelest mercy he had left to give. The weeks that followed divided themselves neatly into public crisis and private ruin. Publicly, Michael was magnificent. Janice steadied. That was one of the few unexpected gifts of catastrophe. Once fear became visible, she got better, quieter, cleaner, useful without apology. Within 10 days, Meridian requested confidential mediation. When Andy finally called Michael from an unknown number, the conversation lasted less than a minute. A pause. I cared about her. No, Michael said. You cared about access. Occasionally, men like you confuse the two. He ended the call and blocked the number. That was the last time they spoke. Privately, the house changed shape. Lena moved into the East Wing, not by decree, but by mutual understanding so immediate it hardly required words. Separation with shared walls. They spoke when necessary at first, then occasionally beyond necessity, then once or twice, honestly. Carla remained. So did the dogs. So did the rhythm of mornings, absurdly intact. Coffee at 6, dawn at the windows, the city exhaling light beyond the glass as if lives inside houses did not break daily and continue anyway. One evening in late January, Michael found Lena in the kitchen making tea. Not because anyone needed tea, because she used to. He stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. You kept the dog's schedule exactly the same after the accident. Lena looked up, startled. Yes, I noticed. Pain crossed her face. I know, she said. Michael crossed to the table and rested one hand on the chair back. He had regained much of his ordinary public movement by then. The bruising had faded. His vision was nearly normal again, though he still wore dark glasses when it served him. Some habits of camouflage were difficult to surrender once they had proven useful. There are things I understand now that I didn't before, he said. Lena waited. About absence, he continued. About how a person can remain physically present in a life while withdrawing from it piece by piece. About how work can wear the clothes of duty while quietly starving everything around it. A tear slid down Lena's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. That understanding, Michael said, does not erase what you did. I know, but it means the story is not simple. At that, she sat down, as if the force of being seen plainly had weakened her knees. No, she whispered. It isn't. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm not ready to call this forgiveness. I wouldn't believe you if you did. That pulled the faintest hint of a smile from him. No, he said. You wouldn't. Silence settled between them, not comfortable, not hostile. Merely true. Finally, Lena asked, What are you ready for? Michael considered the question carefully, because imprecision had cost him enough. Dinner, he said. Tomorrow, public place. 1 hour, no lies. She stared at him, then nodded once. All right. It was not reconciliation. It was not romance. It was not even hope, exactly. It was a measured beginning offered by a man who had learned, at significant cost, that truth did not become less necessary simply because it arrived late. On the first Monday in February, Michael arrived at the office before anyone else. He stood in his corner suite as dawn lifted slowly over the river, silvering the glass towers across the city. Below, streets filled with movement, delivery vans, commuters, steam rising from grates, lives proceeding with their usual arrogant refusal to pause for private catastrophe. His desk behind him was clean. Pulse remained his. Hartley and Company had survived. Stephen was awaiting trial. Meridian was bleeding politely in public. Lena was still in the house. And Michael, who had spent 5 months letting the world believe he could not see, finally allowed himself to admit something difficult and almost laughable in its simplicity. He had gone looking for betrayal and found it. But he had also found the neglected architecture of his own life. A company could be corrected after weakness if its foundation held. A marriage he had learned could be beautifully furnished and still starving. Power was not the same as presence, provision was not the same as intimacy, and helplessness, when performed well enough, could become the most dangerous vantage point a man had ever occupied. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Still 1 hour? No lies. Michael looked at the city, then at his reflection in the window. Faint, partial, but steady. He typed back. Still 1 hour. Then, after a pause, I may be a few minutes late. I'm discovering the world is easier to walk through when you're actually looking at it. He sent the message and slipped the phone into his pocket. Outside, the river caught the first hard line of sunlight and held it. Michael stood there a while longer, seeing what he could. And what he could see, at last, was enough. Michael Hartley spent months in the dark, only to find that the truth was more blinding than the accident. He saved his company, but it makes you wonder, if you had the chance to be a fly on the wall in your own life, would you really want to see what people do when they think you're not looking? Let me know in the comments if Michael was right to keep the secret, or if some truths are better left in the shadows. If you enjoyed this journey into the vault, hit that like button and subscribe to my Story Vault TV for more stories of secrets, betrayal, and the human heart, and I'll see you in the next vault.